Hello everyone, it's Laura here with a couple of cards featuring the new Falling from the Clouds Dynamics set. I'm especially excited and a little bit nervous to show you how it works, since I had a minor hand in inspiring and designing it. The set includes 2 dice which are going to allow you to easily create a special kind of interactive card in which beads move on invisible threads, creating the illusion of rain. In fact, I originally called it a magical rain shaker card. Let's see the first one in action. I've left the original audio on so that you can hear the sound that the beads make. Okay, now let's get to work. You will need a sky panel that measures 3 3/4 by 4 3/4 of an inch, so I started inking a slightly larger piece of smooth white cardstock with 3 colors of Distress Oxide ink. That way I have a little bit of wiggle room to choose the best part for my panel. I stopped for a moment to grab the cover die to check where the ground starts and ink that strip in green. My idea was to make both the panel and the frame match, so I inked the second panel the same way. To give the background some nice texture, I added water droplets with the help of this splatter brush. I also used it to add drops of green distress ink to the lower border. And as a last touch, I sprayed the panels with some glimmer mist. Next I die cut just the cloud piece of the frame and finished the cut with a pair of scissors. I lightly inked the borders with grey distress ink and embossed the sentiment from the Rain or Shine stamp set with a platinum embossing powder. You could of course stamp the sentiment directly onto the frame, but I wanted to add some extra dimension to it. So here's the background panel, which measures 3.75 by 4.75 inches. The card base, which is 8.5 by 5.5, and the frame. I like to make it really sturdy by layering 2 pieces. That way you don't need to add any foam tape to the sides of it. The cute pigs are from Stacy Jacula's Piggy Pebbles stamp set. And here are the main pieces from the featured Falling from the Clouds Dynamics. I drew the lateral notches in black so that they would be easy to see on camera. I also cut another light-colored panel and frame for the same reason. The notches have to be aligned with the edges of the panel, with the fringed borders pointing outwards, like so. But in order to give the beads some space to move, we need strips of foam tape. If we attach the foam tape to a piece of release paper, it's a lot easier to cut, either with a craft knife or scissors. The strip should be 1/4 of an inch wide and 3 3/4 of an inch long. I find it easiest to attach these strips of foam tape to the edges of the panel and then gluing the notch strips on top of them, but of course you could do it however you prefer. The fringed pieces should be hanging off the edges like this. Let's repeat the process on the other side real quick before we move on to stringing the beads. I'm going to use regular black thread so that you can see what I'm doing, but you definitely should use this type of thin, invisible and slippery thread. So the first thing would be to insert the thread through the first notch and secure it to the back of the panel with some double-sided tape. Then we would just string 3/4 of an inch worth of beads on the thread. For the piggy card I used only 8 since they were a bit larger, and for the rainbow card I got away with 10. The idea is that the rows of beads can be hidden by the cloud and ground elements until you tilt or shake the card. When you're done stringing the beads on the thread, you just insert it in the corresponding notch and come back up through the next one. Then you continue until you're finished or you've run out of thread. I actually recommend not using a very long one since it could get tangled, but instead just secure the ends with some tape every time you need to grab a new piece. Let's return to our real panel. Here I'm securing the last piece of thread to the back of it. Next, I add double-sided tape all over so that I can attach it to the card base. For some reason I forgot to zoom out and I'm a little bit off screen, so sorry about that. And because of this you can't actually see how I adhered the upper strips of foam tape to the notch pieces, but it's really easy and you'll see a close-up of the panel right about now. You could in fact use wider strips of foam tape since we don't need the notches anymore, but it's good to have a little bit of wiggle room. I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. Okay, let's assemble the pieces and finish the card. I start by layering the two frames to make a sturdier one. As you can see, my panel fits perfectly behind the frame, but if that wasn't the case, we could trim a smidge of the sides. Of course, being very careful not to cut any of the threads. Now we can adhere the panel to the frame with those foam strips. We peel off the release paper and center the panel as much as possible before pressing it into our frame. Here I'm attaching the interactive panel to our card base. In this card I wanted a white border to show so that the outlines of the piggies wouldn't stand out even more as the only white element. After gluing the cloud border to the card, it's time to adhere the cute pigs. We need to be extra careful so as not to interrupt the movement of the beads. It's best to use foam tape, and in this case, one of their ears are supported by the frame, which is ideal. As a last touch, I added drops of glossy accents to the cloud and to the piggies, who seem to be enjoying themselves very much. Before I leave, let's look at other ideas for the Falling from the Clouds Dynamics set. I love to make large cards, and it's really easy to do some partial die cutting to stretch this frame. We could even add more beads to each thread by layering two of the cloud borders and adding a hill to the ground piece, for example. As you can see, I've die cut half of the frame, and now I'm moving the die along the grooves, taping it in place with some washi tape. This time I will put the upper cutting plate only on the right side of the die, and when I run it through my die cutting machine, I will have a much taller frame to play with. I decided to add strips of foam tape to the sides of the frame so that it won't flatten, especially if I want to mail it. When you do this, you might have to add an extra layer of foam since the frame won't be flexible any longer. I chose stamps from the super cute Rain or Shine set by Birdie Brown and went with the rainbow theme since I was lucky enough to have a bunch of different colored beads in my stash. Here's the finished card. Instead of seed beads, you could try other things like shaped beads, sequins, or hard candy with holes, just to mention a few. All will work a little differently, so have fun and experiment. The rows of thread can also have a purely decorative function with fixed items like die cuts. The possibilities are endless, and I can't wait to see what you create with this set. Check out the description box below for the measurements and a list of products that I used today. Until next time, bye bye!